Welcome to Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. These are the stories of those who have received, given, and who are waiting for the gift of life, organ transplantation. Now here's your host and heart and kidney recipient, BJ Odom.
Welcome to the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast, where we explore the extraordinary world of organ transplantation. I'm your host, BJ Odom. Each week we share inspiring stories and introduce you to remarkable individuals sharing their own transplant stories. Be sure to support the podcast by leaving that 5-star review and subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Have a transplant story to share or a comment on the show? Our email address is giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to connect with us on Facebook at Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. Welcome to episode 50. This week, Derek Lindstrom ran 114 marathons with his heart and hoped to run one again as a heart transplant recipient. His heart function had fallen to less than 10% by the time he was admitted to the intensive care unit. The end looked bleak and near. But through it all, he did run again. His journey is filled with ups and downs along the way. You won't want to miss this heartwarming, incredible story. We'll talk to Derek Lindstrom coming up next. So we hear Derek has a very wonderful story. I'm excited to hear it. But before we start, Derek, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
I grew up upper Midwest between Wisconsin and upper Michigan, and I've been a runner or an endurance athlete my whole life. And in the spring of 2018, I had my first little stroke and found out I was, not soon after that, found I was in line for a heart transplant at some point. Then December 3rd of 2023, I received my heart transplant. So in a nutshell, that's it. But married kids, we have between us, we have 6 kids and we have a busy household and work full time and stuff. But that's it.
You know what's, I like talking to athletes, but I don't know if I've talked to an athlete with a heart transplant. With a kidney transplant, yes. And, with a liver transplant, yes. And so I'm going to ask this question, which I love asking to athletes, that were, really strong, because you ran before you had your heart problems? Like, what was it, 115 marathons?
Yeah, I ran 114 marathons before transplant, and Ironmans and ultras, and I love, and still to this day, I love racing. I love towing the line. Now, it's a little different now because obviously it's a lot slower. But I just crave it. Even since transplant, I think last year, I raced 9 times. Already a couple times this year. We have 3 races this spring before this summer hit, and that's when the big ones, the big ones happen. So.
My big question is for you. See, I was sick from birth. I had my first open heart surgery at 22 months old, and another one like when I was 13. In 1968. And so I have never really been like an athlete and really in fit. And so it was always a way of life to me. The question I have for you, being an athlete and being so fit, all of a sudden you're told you're going to need a heart transplant. Sometimes I think that might be more unearthing than it was for someone like me who had been sick most of my life and found out you're going to need a heart transplant. What did that conversation go like? And if you can remember, what were your feelings?
I got to be honest, that's probably the hardest part of this whole journey was those first few months. Let's just say the summer of 2018. Being a runner and coach and all this stuff, I just felt like, and I talk about this from time to time, I felt like I lost my identity as a runner, as a coach. My whole pipeline is athletes basically. And, but I think in the long run, it helped me because once I got put on the list, I knew it was my journey for 6 years. So once I got listed, it was no big deal. Once I got put in the ICU, it was no big deal. In the ICU, we had a false alarm, no big deal, because I had all these years and all this time to ready myself for it. And but boy, those first few months after I first found out they were not easy. I got to be honest.
So would you say being an athlete and, having that, I don't know, that nature behind you, to compete and to win, do you think that really helped you through the process?
Well, yes. However, by the time I had that first stroke in March of 2018, I had my ejection fraction, or my heart function was already at like 23. So this probably was going on for a number of years before that. But being an athlete, doing races, you just feel tired because of workouts. You feel beat up because of the last marathon. In hindsight, there was probably some clues or some signs that I just missed, because I'm an athlete. I'm just tired. I'm getting old. I had a hard workout, but probably should have gone in a little earlier. In hindsight.
Yeah. I know some of us, out there, and maybe you were that way too. You're going, this is nothing. I'll just run it off, or I'll just work it off. And then sometimes you fall behind because of that also.
Yeah. In 2015, 2016, I had a tough Boston, and then I had a really tough New York marathon. And just not training enough, just getting older. You have all these excuses, but when you look back, I was in heart failure when I did those. So, who knows how far back, that was happening. So, and they honestly, they don't know what it was, why it happened. It could have been a virus, could have been Lyme's disease, could have been a number of things, but it is what it is. That was the journey.
Now, I know you mentioned a few times you were in intensive care and things like that. So you started at the beginning, you said you found out you had heart failure, and where did that, how did the journey go? Let's just kind of hear Derek's journey here.
Yeah. That early March of 2018, I just had a small stroke, or a TIA, which just brought on all sorts of tests, and none of them are good. Sleep study in May found out, heart rate at night was getting to like low 20s. So I got a pacemaker, defibrillator, stuff like that. And it was just years of tests, and I was fit enough to keep me off the list, because I still had a VO2 max of, I don't remember, just say it's 45 or 50. So it always kept me off of the list, but I finally got listed in March of 2023. And then they bumped me up in June of that year. Then October, I got, went in for a routine test, and they were keeping you. So I went into cardiac ICU in October 17th of 2023 and stayed there for 2 months until they found an organ for me.
So then you basically then weren't on the list that long, because at the time you went on the list, you were in pretty bad shape then.
Well, I think when I went in for that test on October 17th, when they kept me, I had a heart function of, I call it 6%, but it's 6 to 10%. But I was functioning, I was functioning fine, I think, because it was such a gradual decline. This had probably been, just say it was 10 years. I probably just got used to it, and even at 10% or 6%, I was doing just fine. And but at any point, I died a couple times, where my defibrillator zapped me back to life, and that was always the fear,
Thank goodness I had a defibrillator for a while, and it never went off, not once.
Oh my gosh! I was playing basketball. I was, you're not supposed to do, like, just say like basketball or anything that's got a quick outburst, that kind of thing. But I was playing basketball with my wife, who played basketball in college and stuff. And we were just in a parking lot playing at a middle school, and basically I just died. I just collapsed on and just zapped me back to life. And it's quite the, it just feels like you get, and they say this, it feels like you got kicked in the chest by a horse.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what that feels like, but that's what it felt like. So if I would have known, but, and then the second time I was on the treadmill, probably running too fast, and, I basically died, and I fell off the treadmill, 9 staples in my head and stuff, and just went off, and, and I was fine. But that was the fear. I mean, when I got to that 6 to 10%, it could have gone off
Now,
anytime,
I remember when I found out that, my cardiologist said, eventually you're going to need a transplant, but you're still too healthy to get one. And of course I took that as like, oh, that's good. I'm glad I'm too healthy to get one. I'm doing, just by hearing those words, I said, I'm doing good. and then finally he said, I think it's time that you get listed. And I went to Tampa General and was listed. And I never will forget that conversation because I worked in radio and stand-up comedy, which to me are not the hardest. It's not like I'm running a marathon, okay? And the doctor goes, you need to quit doing whatever you're doing immediately. And I go, you don't get it. I talk on the radio. I get on a stage and I tell jokes. I'm not doing a whole lot. And he goes, no, you don't get it. You need to stop doing everything. And I'm like, whoa, what the heck is it? And he goes, we're going to get you on the list. And kind of like you, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was my insurance I had or whatever, but they would put me in the hospital for 10 days. Then they go, oh, we got to let you go for 5 days. And then we want you to come back in another 5 days and we'll readmit you. And they'd put a swan in my neck. And, they would, I did go home and I had a drip where I was on an IV drip, like 24 hours a day. And I had a little bag that I carried with me along my side, that would do that. But, I thought, because I was sick all my life too, but I go, I'm feeling normal. But boy, after that transplant, I knew what normal was after that. And I'm going, whoa, I ain't never felt like this before. This is awesome stuff.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing.
So you're back to doing marathons again then, huh?
Yeah, they're just, they're a little slower. It's, I should say a lot slower. But, when I was in the ICU, this would have been the fall of 23. There's a 50K in Upper Michigan. We have a house in Upper Michigan. There's a 50K race that I always want to do. So I signed up for it. I signed up for a marathon while I was in ICU. And so I got transplant done and I had these races to do. So, and not knowing, because I had never really talked with anybody that had a heart transplant. I was in pretty good shape, I thought, going into it. I just thought I would get a heart transplant. I would recover and you and I would go running 10 miles. I just thought that's what it would be like. And that's not, it's not the case at all. So,
yeah, what was your recovery like in getting ready for those marathons?
It wasn't bad. I did a number of 5Ks probably 3 months out, and they were just slow, and but all, because of meds, I picked up type 2 diabetes. It went away. Picked up neuropathy in my feet for the longest time, which went away, and just challenges, but better those challenges than having that defibrillator go off again. Let's not have that challenge, because that was something.
Now, I read also that you and your wife almost walk a 5K every day. I don't know how. See, this is how non-athletic I am. Now, in layman's term, how do you walk 5K? So what is that every morning?
Well, I have a goal of 10,000 steps every day, and that's what I do. And, this summer I've got, a bunch, I got these 6 events, that I'm doing. And I just need to keep steps up. And some of them I use poles with. Last night I went out for 3 hours on the trails with hiking poles and just jog the downhills, hike the uphills kind of thing. And, just about all I can do. So I did it.
Now, did you get that, that energy pretty much as soon as you got the transplant come back? Or, obviously, you got to build back up to the marathons, but what was the energy level right after your transplant?
You've probably experienced this. Yeah, I got to tell you, I was only in the hospital for 11 days, 11 or 12 days after transplant. And I wish they would have kept me for a couple more days because it was those first few days at the house were pretty tough. But, we'd get outside middle of winter here in Wisconsin. We'd get out and walk, as much as we could and stuff. And yeah, just got into PT and started running again and jogging. And, just it wasn't, it was a battle, but it wasn't, it was fine.
Yeah, I lived about
just a battle.
I lived about 3 hours away from my transplant center. So they actually, for a month, I had to stay close to the hospital there in Tampa Bay. But, we had a hotel, and I forget what the disease was, but maybe you remember this because I got my transplant in 2003, and there was some disease going on, and, people were wearing a mask when they had it. It wasn't COVID, but it was, I don't know, it was one of those really crazy diseases. And when anybody would see me in a mask in the hotel, in an elevator,
I can only imagine.
I always got to ride just all by myself with my wife.
I'm sure.
Because as soon as they would see me walking
you were sick.
Oh yeah, they'd see me with that mask and they would scatter. And I'm going, well, this is good for me because nobody wants to be around me. But there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just protecting myself from you. And I just never will forget that. An elevator would open and I would be standing in there. Go ahead. We'll get the next one.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But you're doing good now. So and you're what, 10? How long? How far out are you again now?
15 months.
Oh, 15 months. Oh, you're
15 months.
You're just a baby then.
I know. When you're still, it's kind of like having a baby when you're still listing the age in months. Then, it's my son. He's 73 months old. But that's, but I'm still, I could say a little over a year, but it's 15 months basically, 15, 16.
Now, obviously, you've written your thank you letter. To me, that was a very, very hard thing to do because I didn't want to brag how well I felt, but I felt amazing. Or did you write your letter to your donor family?
We did. And I think we talked before. I was disappointed to hear the percentage of donor families that contact, recipients. And it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's less than 5%. And I understand the grief, and whatnot there, but I honestly thought that number would be reverse, that it would be 95%, contact, but that's not the case. And we'd love to meet the donor family, but respect the privacy and whatnot. And obviously they're on their own journey and they're because of a loss. And, and we had talked earlier about this when we did last spring. I didn't know any better, and we did one of our first 5Ks, and it was a Donate Life event for Freighter Hospital here in town called the Cream City 5K. And I did it, and I got done, and there was a woman there, 30s, and she had Donate Life license plates on her car. I was like, that's cool. So I, struck up a conversation, and she was there with 2 sets of parents. So we got talking. She traveled to races with her parents and her donor parents. And, so that was my first experience. So I just thought that's how things work, and just not knowing.
Yeah. And
that's not how it works, and just, we sent our letter, and, in hopes and, maybe we'll send another one, but, I'm pretty far out there with, newspaper articles and TVs and, TV and stuff like that I'm, pretty accessible. So. Pretty easy to find. And,
I know both sides of the fence, actually. I've known people who have met their donor families. I've, know a lot of people that have not. I know there are transplant recipients that really, in a weird way, don't want to meet their donor families. And then like you, that they do. And then there's, some of the donor families have told me how rewarding it is to meet the individuals that received their child's organ or their loved one's organs. But each and every story is different and amazing in its own way.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah. And it's just from what I'm doing with this, second chance at life, it's amazing, and, fastest from transplant to 50K, fastest to marathon. And, this summer I'm hoping to become the first heart transplant recipient to do a 100-mile run.
Whoa, 100
And,
miles?
yeah, so that'll be, that's August 19th out in Leadville, Colorado. So that's
You might
everything I do is all about August 19th. So
you might want to check in with us again when you do that. That sounds like that's a story in itself. Now,
yeah,
how long are you expecting this journey?
well, they cut you off at 30 hours. So you start at 4 in the morning on Saturday and you have till noon on Sunday. But I've got an amazing team all set up already, and yeah, it is part of a series. So there's what's called it used to be called the Lead Man series. Now it's called Lead Challenge, and I do the Leadville Trail Marathon in June, and I have to finish that to move on. So you have to finish before you move on. So I finished that one. Then in July I go out for a 50-mile mountain bike on Sunday the 13th. And then August is the 9th is a 100-mile bike, the 10th is a 10K trail run, and the 16th then is the 100-mile run. But you need to finish each race to move on to the next one. So I will have hundreds of miles on my legs by the time the 100-mile run, shows up. But, it's a challenge I'm looking forward to.
Wow, you're quite amazing there. I'm proud of you. Now, obviously, I don't know if we mentioned this when, because a lot of times I talk to the folks I interview like you, a few days in advance. And I can't remember if we talked about this or not, but are you planning on, or have you done the Transplant Olympics, or, the games as they call them? Or
last summer, when they were here, I think they were in Alabama last year. I was I guess I wasn't out of surgery long enough.
Okay.
I think you had to be like 9 months, out or something. So I couldn't. And this year it's the world, this summer is, and I think in Germany, which, I'll be in Colorado racing instead. But next year, I think the transplant games are maybe like in Denver or something like that, or which I'll be there. I'll just load up on as many events as I can, just, just so I can compete.
Now, did you start out like in high school running cross country track, or what is,
Yep.
what is you, let's revert back to your younger days, but before the illness and the transplant. But when did you first get into
Seems like
sports?
it was just yesterday, it seems like. And I remember this because, I talk about this, often, is August of 1976. Me and a buddy of mine were watching the Olympics on TV, and the marathon was on, which they didn't. They just basically showed the finish of it. And I went out for a run, and I just kept running. And I ran in, obviously junior high, then in high school, and then I ran in college and found some success and just kept running. And, it ends up being where your friends are runners, and you're just following that lifestyle, what have you. And just always been that way. So
All right. Now,
a lot of marathons along the way, a lot of, Ironmans and ultras and whatever I could. Just had a hard time turning down a race at 3 feet.
now, what do you think of? Now, this is a total curveball I'm throwing at you.
Yeah, please.
But what do you? Now, I know you like running races. What do you think of automobile races?
I used to watch NASCAR quite a bit. This would have been back in the 90s. But yeah, it's pretty cool. But I'm just an endurance athlete, and I enjoy watching and participating in endurance sports. So
cool. I'm like, I must be lazy because I like NASCAR. I like the Indy Series. Not too far from Sebring, Florida, where they have the 24 hours of Sebring. But
that's wonderful.
I enjoy that kind of racing, and maybe because like I was a sickly little boy and never got to participate in sports, and I would run around the house. But like I said, I'm doing good now, so that's great.
Well, it's interesting. The first weekend in May, I think it's May 3rd, we're at Indy Speedway for a run. there's a half marathon in Indianapolis called the Indy Mini, and it starts and finishes downtown Indianapolis. And I have my son and his family, 2 grandkids live there. But part of the race is you run out towards the speedway and you take a lap, 2.5 miles on the speedway, run back.
Yeah,
And it's called the Indy Mini, and I've never run it, and the whole family's going to run it. I think it sounds like a great time.
yeah, that's my old stopping grounds in a way.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I'm from Northwest Indiana originally, and I have been at the Indianapolis 500 many a times. And now that I've lived here in Florida for over 40 years, I've been at the Daytona 500 many of times also.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, that's so cool. And I've taken, I've raced a lot in Indiana before, and that was my marathon last fall. I did Indianapolis just because of family and stuff. And so looking forward to that. And I am doing the end of May, actually June 1st. A group of friends are going out to the Grand Canyon to do this. It's called Rim to Rim to Rim. And basically you start at the south side and you go down to the canyon, you go across and up to the north side, and you turn around and come back. And it's like 48 miles, light jogging, hiking, 15 hours kind of thing. And so it's just another adventure, couldn't turn it down, as you know.
Now, I don't want to put the horse before the cart here.
Yeah, please.
But before we went on the podcast, you were telling me that you are on the way to do a podcast or thinking about a podcast. Do we have a name for it yet? Do you have a debut yet for it?
We don't have a debut date yet. But yeah, we're going to be the heart transplant athlete is what it's going to be. And, my years of, I coached athletes for years, and I coached some amazing athletes and national champions, a lot of Boston Olympic trials qualifiers and stuff. And there is some, my story's unique, I think, but there's some amazing stories out there with some amazing athletes that look forward to, to talking to them and, looking forward to it. Should be fun.
Cool. Yeah. Well, we'll be looking forward.
I don't have that radio background like you do, so so I'm just going to, wing the first few episodes or try to, but once I get in the meat and potatoes, there's some truly talented and truly amazing people out there. And whether they know it or not, of inspiring people.
What I would suggest to you too is when you do get your guest, because a lot of them are not radio people or television people.
Mm-hmm.
And what I always tell them, just pretend like you're sitting at the table having a cup of coffee or a soda or whatever you enjoy, whatever beverage you are, and you're just talking about your experience and you're talking about transplants, and it's just a one-on-one conversation. And one, it puts your guest at ease. And if you do it that way, I think you'll be very successful. At least that's kind of been my way of thinking. And I've been in broadcasting since I was in high school. And it was always just pretty much just have a conversation with someone.
Yeah. And I don't have that background, but boy, the stories of all these years of racing and all these friends with these journeys, and it's pretty amazing. I think I could fill up a number of episodes, and we have a buddy of mine that we're talking to next Wednesday, probably our second episode, national champion at University of Wisconsin Oshkosh, 3 times, just an amazing athlete who's now a professional golfer, got away from running, and he's just one of those guys that can do whatever he wants to do. And just the stories are incredible. A lot of people out there like that you just, don't even hear about. So
now, one question also, I know you're still running and you're doing marathons. Now, are you out? Because I think in our community, a lot of us do. We are very active. That's kind of why I did this podcast. I do a podcast that I've been doing for over 3 years with my old morning radio show partner that we were together for many, many years. In fact, we lost our job because of my heart transplant. They moved on to another morning show. But besides that, I saw Christine Applegate on Jimmy Kimmel one night talking about her MS. And she goes, I think it's important for people to know my story and other stories. And she has a friend who has MS. And so they talk about MS. They talk with patients of MS to spread the word. And I said, well, what the heck? I've been doing podcasts for like 2 years. I should be doing a podcast about transplants. And so
Absolutely.
that's where this one all began. But are you out there promoting, the transplant world?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to say I work for Donate Life, but I think like a week from next Wednesday is like the Donate Life flag raising at Freighter Hospital, and I'll be there and I'll speak as I did last year. And whenever I race, I race in Donate Life. I have a Donate Life shirt and gear and hat and stuff like that. That's what I race in, and yeah, I'm forever grateful for especially Freighter Hospital here in Milwaukee. Every step of that journey was just amazing. And what Donate Life does, you can't thank them enough. So I'll make sure everybody's an organ donor. Or do my best.
Yeah,
So
I think we all are in that boat. Yeah, we all try to share the word as much as possible. I know.
And I would say I didn't even know. I mean, I was always an organ donor. I checked the box on my driver's license. I had no idea what that meant. I mean, I had no idea what it meant to do that. And so much more involved in that. But yeah, just crazy.
And I think it's what's sad. And maybe it is with all illnesses, even cancer. Although that seems to strike in every family, but really until it affects you or a loved one or an immediate friend, it's something you really don't think about or you don't concentrate about until, it hits you. And I think that's what, we really try to push the awareness, because there's just a lot of people, even, today that, well, okay, yeah, I put it on my driver's license. If I die, they might give my organs to somebody. Okay. Yeah, that sounds cool. But they don't really understand the whole process or the whole world either. So that's what we're trying to do here on this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And, being so naive, it's like, well, move somewhere where there's a lot of people that die. Well, they can't die, because if they die, then the organs are, they have to be kept alive, just stuff like that I just never understood. I just, obviously, and now I'm, pretty well versed in that, but yeah, I had no idea. Just getting better.
Well, before we let you go, is there anything we missed or anything you'd like to share with the audience before we let you go today?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk. It's it is I look at it as it's just part of my journey, but it's been quite the story, and hopefully it gives people some hope that are going through some tough times, that when you're done, you can do anything. I'm a firm believer that anybody can do anything, and I've got a Facebook friend. I've actually never met him. His name's Derek Fitzgerald, I believe, Fitzpatrick. He had cancer, really bad, went through cancer, went through chemo or whatever. His heart went bad. So he then got a heart transplant on top of that. A number of years later, he did an Ironman triathlon after all that.
Wow.
I mean, it's just the craziest story that I think I'm special. And I look at Derek and wow. I mean, I'm in awe of him. And at some point, I'd like to think that I would interview him on our podcast. But what an amazing story. And there's a number of people out there, like that. They just need to have that story told. And it's pretty amazing.
I know you said
pretty amazing stuff. What medical technology can do nowadays.
Like
how you can get a heart transplant. I don't think about it a lot anymore, but I go in the bathroom, getting ready to shower, you take your shirt off. So, oh my gosh, I yell at my wife, hey, we had a heart transplant, kind of thing. And, so a lot of days I don't think about it, but it's amazing to think of, what I went through, and what we can accomplish with this now. So.
Now, as you said, you did a lot of coaching in your lifetime too. So I want to put you on the spot here, and I hope you don't mind, but okay.
No, please.
Now let's say you're a coach,
yep.
And there's someone out there waiting for a heart, a kidney, any organ at all, and they're struggling. All right, coach, let's fire them up before the game.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's on a different journey. I was lucky in that my journey, I was healthy, and as it pertains, if somebody can go out and walk, go out and walk. It's, you know, get out, walk around the block, healthy options when you're eating. It's just simple stuff like that that made my journey, I think, a lot easier, as opposed to, I was never overweight, never a smoker or drugs or anything like that. So, my journey was easier, but that's what I would tell people: to stay active, and, after transplant, boy, do what you can, enjoy life, but go for those walks and those hikes and get fresh air. And, it makes all the difference, and that's why, my wife and I have this goal of 10,000 steps a day. And I think that as you age, it makes all the difference. So stay strong, stay better, brighter days, just stay strong and get through it and do the best you can.
Thank you so much, Derek, for sharing your incredible story with us today. And be sure to join us each week for a new heartfelt episode, Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. If you have a transplant story, email us, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. You can also email us with any comments you may have on the show. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, and don't forget to like and share this episode. And we would appreciate your 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. A big thank you to the Podcast Playground Network for making this all possible for you to listen each and every week. Also, like to talk just a second about another podcast that I'm involved with, BJ and Bill, the podcast. We're just two retired radio morning show hosts that, like to relive the past and, share some of our experience as senior citizens. Make sure you catch it real soon. Until next time, I'm BJ Odom. Thank you so much for being a part of our journey and reminding us all to appreciate each and every day and to treasure the extraordinary gift of life.
He was running on empty, heart fading fast. Doctor said, man, you ain't gonna last. But a stranger's kindness, a gift so true, turned the night sky into something new. He got a second chance, he got a brand new spark. Like a freight train rolling back from the dark. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. Years later, the road got rough. The fight ain't over when the climb is tough. Needed a kidney, the race was on. Another hero stepped up, kept him strong. Every breath he takes is a tale of hope. One life saved, another can cope. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. Doctor's hands, a donor's grace, running on down to a brand new place. Second chances don't come twice, but when they do, man, they feel so nice. Let's spread the word, let the people know. One yesterday lets a miracle grow. You don't need wings just to save a man. Just a little love, a helping hand. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. BJ still rocking, still standing tall. Thanks to the ones who gave it all. Gift of life, hear the sound. Pass it on, pass it down. The Gift of Life podcast, hosted by BJ Odom. Listen now. Listen now.